During his usual morning patrol in the harsh northern wilderness, Arctic Reserve Ranger Nathan Harris heard a piercing cry. The frost was especially intense that day, and the cold wind whipped up snow, making visibility poor. Nathan followed the sound, which led him to a natural ice bridge over a partially frozen river. There he discovered a deep pit trap with a weary polar bear cub inside, already losing strength from cold and exhaustion. Through the blizzard, Nathan noticed that the walls of the pit had been clearly worked on. Poachers had made them steep and smooth on purpose. Tool marks and fresh claw scratches on the ice showed the cub's desperate attempts to escape. The pit was quite deep, and its edges had been intentionally soaked with water, which quickly froze to create a dangerously slippery surface. Nathan saw a few drops of blood on the ice. The cub had injured itself while trying to climb out. Looking around, Nathan spotted the mother bear trapped in a steel net set by the poachers. Her paw was badly hurt by the metal cables, and each attempt to free herself only worsened her injury. She looked helplessly in the direction of her struggling cub. The net was expertly set. The cables were anchored firmly to a massive ice block, frozen deep into the ground. Each movement by the mother bear tightened the cables around her paw. The thermometer on Nathan's watch showed a further drop in temperature. Snow falling into the pit began to form an icy crust on the cub's fur. Its movements grew slower, and its cries became weaker. Quickly assessing the situation, Nathan realized he needed to rescue the cub first, as its condition was critical. He took climbing gear from his backpack. A sturdy rope capable of holding a great weight, carabiners, and compact blocks to create a hoisting system. Nathan's hands began to go numb from the cold, even in heated gloves. He methodically assembled the hoisting system, securing one end of the rope to a large ice outcrop. Time was against him. Every minute lost reduced the cub's chance of survival. His first attempt to throw a loop was unsuccessful. The icy rope didn't handle well with his frozen hands. The cub weakly jerked when the loop touched its side. The second attempt also failed as the loop slipped off the cub's snow-covered fur. Suddenly, Nathan heard the distant hum of snowmobiles. It seemed the poachers were returning to check their traps. The ranger sped up his actions, realizing he had less time. The third attempt was successful, the loop securely wrapped around the cub. Lifting it required great care. Any sudden movement could hurt the weakened cub. Nathan slowly pulled the rope, trying to keep the cub away from the sharp ice edges. The hum of snowmobiles grew louder. With one final pull, the cub was on the surface. Its body was covered in a layer of ice, and its breathing was irregular. Nathan quickly examined the cub. Besides multiple small cuts, there were no severe injuries, but hypothermia posed a real threat. Taking a special thermal blanket from his backpack, he carefully wrapped the cub. The cub didn't resist. It seemed to understand that the man was trying to help. Its eyes were half closed from exhaustion, but they showed trust. Hiding the cub behind a large snowbank, Nathan returned to the mother bear. The lock on the chain was more complicated than he expected. The poachers had used a tamper-proof mechanism. Nathan's fingers trembled from the cold as he pulled out a multi-tool. The mother bear unexpectedly became calm, as if realizing that this man was trying to help. Her breath created clouds in the frosty air, and her dark eyes watched his every move. Nathan noticed that the blood on her paw had started to freeze. The sound of approaching snowmobiles grew louder. Now Nathan could make out voices. The poachers were talking among themselves, clearly pleased with the prospect of their catch. The ranger doubled his efforts, working on the lock. The mechanism was tricky. Any wrong move increased the pressure on the mother bear's paw. Nathan acted cautiously, using his knowledge of such devices. His hands moved methodically despite the freezing cold and rising tension. The first level of security was disabled after a few minutes. Nathan heard a quiet click inside the lock. One of the blocking mechanisms was deactivated. There were 2 more levels to go, and time was running out. The poachers appeared suddenly. 3 armed men emerged from the snowstorm. The leader, a tall man with a gray beard, was the first to notice the empty trap. His face twisted in anger when he saw the tracks in the snow. The second poacher immediately headed toward the captured mother bear. Nathan continued to work on the lock, trying to stay hidden behind the massive bear. His fingers instinctively found the right mechanism. The second level of security was bypassed. Only the final, most difficult one remained. One of the poachers spotted movement and raised his gun. "Hey, someone's there," he shouted, stepping forward. Nathan knew that time was running out. His fingers found the last mechanism in the lock. A sudden gust of wind lifted a veil of snow, momentarily blinding the poachers. That brief moment was all he needed. The lock finally gave way. The sound of the falling chain echoed in the frosty air. Sensing her freedom, the mother bear rose to her full height. Her appearance was like a snow-covered mountain. Her massive white body towered over the men, and her eyes burned with fury. The poachers froze in shock. Nathan took advantage of the confusion and disappeared into the blizzard. Behind him, he heard the bear's powerful roar and the frightened cries of the men scattering in all directions. The ranger quickly made his way to where he had hidden the cub, knowing that the mother would find her cub by scent. From a distance, Nathan watched as the mother bear, after driving off the poachers, quickly found her cub. She carefully lifted it and carried it deep into the reserve to safer wintering places. The following 2 months passed in heightened alert. Nathan knew the poachers wouldn't forgive him for ruining their hunt. He began noticing strange snowmobile tracks in remote areas of the reserve, as if someone was studying his patrol routes. On that fateful day, the temperature dropped even lower than usual. Nathan discovered fresh traces of poacher activity: trampled snow, cigarette butts, snowmobile tracks. He took out his camera to document the evidence, unaware that he was already in someone's crosshairs. The first shot sounded like a pop. The poachers were using blanks, aiming to drive the ranger into a trap. Nathan dodged, but 4 armed men had already surrounded him. Among them, he recognized the gray-bearded leader. "Playing hero, are you?" The leader sneered, signaling his men to close in. His eyes were as cold as the ice around them. Nathan tried to reach for his radio, but a strong blow to his back knocked him down. The villains acted quickly and professionally, clearly not for the first time. Strong ropes painfully cut into the ranger's wrists. One of the poachers methodically searched his backpack, throwing out all his equipment into the snow. The radio went into a snowbank, followed by his phone. The leader pulled out a map and pointed to a spot. "There," he commanded, pushing Nathan forward. They walked for about an hour through deep snow, venturing further into deserted territory. The frost grew sharper, and the wind began to pick up a blizzard. With each step, Nathan realized the situation was growing more hopeless. This part of the reserve was rarely patrolled, and in this weather, there was no hope for help. The poachers had clearly chosen a place where no one would disturb them. Suddenly, one of the criminals stopped sharply. His face turned pale. He had heard something through the howling blizzard. The others froze, straining to see through the snow. The sound repeated, a deep, rumbling growl that chilled the blood. A huge white figure emerged as if from nowhere. The bear moved silently, despite her impressive size. Nathan immediately recognized her by the scar on her paw. It was the very animal he had saved 2 months earlier. "Don't move," the leader whispered, slowly raising his gun. But the bear had already positioned herself between the poachers and the tied-up Nathan. Her powerful body radiated a threat, and her eyes were focused on the armed men. The poachers started to back away slowly, not taking their eyes off the massive predator. The snow crunched under their feet, and each sound triggered another warning growl from the bear. Her behavior was unusual. She didn't attack, but wouldn't let them approach Nathan either. One of the poachers panicked and reached for his rifle. The bear reacted instantly. Her growl grew louder, and her stance became more threatening. She took a step forward, showing her impressive size and strength. This was the breaking point. Fear finally overtook their desire for revenge. "Let's go," the leader shouted, and the poachers fled, dropping their gear in the snow. Their heavy breathing and the crunch of snow underfoot slowly faded into the blizzard. The bear remained motionless, closely watching the retreating criminals. Her muscles were tense, ready to act if anyone decided to return. Only when the last sounds of footsteps dissolved into the wind did she turn to Nathan. Her approach, despite the recent rescue, made his heart race. A huge predator weighing over half a ton could end a human's life with a single swipe. Yet her movements were surprisingly gentle. She stopped a few steps away from Nathan and sniffed. There was recognition in her eyes. She remembered the scent of the man who had saved her and her cub. The bear tilted her massive head, her black nose almost touching the snow as she sniffed at the ropes binding Nathan's hands. Suddenly, the blizzard intensified, reducing visibility to nearly zero. But the bear seemed to be waiting for this. In the relative cover of the swirling snow, she cautiously moved closer to the ropes. Her warm breath thawed Nathan's frozen hands. To Nathan's amazement, the bear began to gently chew through the ropes. Her enormous teeth, capable of ripping through sealskin, worked with incredible precision, avoiding touching Nathan's skin. One by one, the knots gave way until Nathan was completely free. After releasing him, the bear took a few steps back but didn't leave. She seemed to be waiting for him to stand and gather himself. Nathan slowly got up, stretching his stiff limbs. His wrists were red from the ropes, but fortunately, there were no serious injuries. "Thank you," he whispered, looking into the animal's dark eyes. The bear tilted her head slightly, as if understanding the word. In that moment, an extraordinary bond formed between human and wild animal. Two beings who had saved each other stood together in the vast Arctic wilderness. Nathan knew he had witnessed something unique. A predator known for its ferocity had shown not only remarkable memory, but also compassion. The bear didn't just recognize him, she had repaid her debt by saving him from mortal danger. After a few more seconds, the bear turned and calmly walked into the depths of the snow-covered tundra. Her massive form slowly disappeared into the blizzard, leaving only a trail of footprints in the snow and an incredible story of mutual salvation. This encounter forever changed Nathan's understanding of wild animals. He realized that even the most fearsome predators were capable of gratitude and kindness. In the harsh conditions of the Arctic, where ancient survival instincts ruled, a remarkable bond between human and wild animal had been possible.